Obsolete, a Halloween special written by Davis Z02. If there is one place the engines of the North Western Railway try to avoid, it is Kildane's smelter's yard. It is a dark and sinister place where old engines come to meet their end. Back in the 1950s, the smelter's yard made a deal with British Railways to scrap old steam engines and then melt down their metals into something useful. The deal also included a purchase of two GWshunters, Arry and Bert, or as the steam engines tend to call them, the grim messengers of doom. They are a pair of malicious diesels who enjoy scrapping old engines and teasing the Sodor engines about the end of steam on the mainland. One day, James arrived at the smelter's yard with a trainload of scrap. He hated visiting the smelter's yard. It made him feel very uneasy and very uncomfortable. James had been delayed and was in a bad mood, and seeing the smug grins on Arry and Bert's faces didn't improve his mood. Hello, what we got here? Smirked Arry. Looks like a trainload of scrap, Arry, grinned Bert. We appreciate your sacrifice, rusty red scrap iron. We'll make sure to turn you into something useful. Oh, shut up, snapped James. I'm not here to be scrapped, and you know it. Even you must admit, you've long passed your expiry date. You being so late just proves that, chortled Arry. If I were you, I would accept your fate. James grimaced. He had only been there 5 minutes, and he already had enough. If anyone has passed your expiry date, it's you two, he snapped. Arry and Bert stared. What are you talking about? Snarled Bert. Haven't you heard? Said James, with a grin. They've started withdrawing older diesels like you. About time if you ask me. It's what you deserve after the way you've treated us. Arry and Bert didn't say anything at first. They just stared at James. Then they both scowled. You're full of old boiler sludge, snapped Arry. Us diesels are far superior than you steamers, boasted Bert. Do you really expect us to believe that? Just you wait, said James smugly. Soon they'll be bringing diesels down here to be scrapped too. And with that, James puffed away, leaving a pair of very cross GWshunters behind. What a load of rubbish, grumbled Bert. He better stay away from here if he knows what's good for him, muttered Arry darkly. The two diesels got to work, shunting truckloads of scrap into the smelting shed and bringing the fresh steel to the exchange sidings. While they didn't mention it, deep down, they were still thinking about what James had said. While they tried to brush it off, it did make them rather uneasy. A few days later, their manager came to see them. We've got a shipment coming in from the mainland today. We will be scrapping on site, so we need both of you to shunt away the relics. Yes, sir, said the two diesels. I wonder what it will be. Maybe some old industrial tanks who didn't get the message in '68, suggested Bert. That would be satisfying, grinned Arry. Maybe some rusting husks from another scrapyard. Whatever it is, we'll make sure to give them the warmest welcome. The two diesels laughed grimly. But when the delivery arrived, it was something very different. Something very unexpected. A group of solemn, scruffy-looking diesels from the mainland rolled into the smelter's yard. Behind them were a bunch of rusting old diesel engines. There were Peaks, Whistlers, Choppers, and even a Deltic. Arry and Bert stared on in disbelief. There was no way that this could be the delivery. There was no way that James was telling the truth. There was no way that this could be happening right now. And yet, it was. Arry and Bert spent the rest of the day shunting the old diesels into sidings so they could be cut up. What's going on? Bert whispered to a Peak. The Peak didn't answer. It just stared at Bert with a look of defeat before closing its eyes. Over the next few weeks, more and more diesels were brought into the smelter's yard to be melted down. Arry and Bert couldn't believe that this was happening. They even confronted their manager, but he just told them it's just business. It made the two diesels very cross. A few days later, Arry had been told to shunt some trucks to the back of the smelting shed. As he rolled into the siding, he noticed one of the old diesel engines sitting on the other siding. He had probably been in the worst condition out of all of the diesels, with broken windows, dull rusted blue paintwork. His window frames had once been painted white, but were now a miserable grey. The diesel looked over at Arry with a cold, icy stare. It made Arry incredibly uncomfortable. He wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. He waited for his driver to change the points, but he didn't. What's the hold up? Stuttered Arry, trying to avoid eye contact with the diesel. A bloody lever's jammed, that's the hold up, grumbled the driver. Well, hurry up and fix it, cried Arry. It's cold and I want to get back to my shed. Alright, go for help. Calm down. And with that, Arry's driver went crossly away, leaving Arry all alone with the diesel. Arry sat on the siding in silence for the longest time. He did everything in his power to not look over at the large Deltic. Even though he wasn't looking in that direction, he could feel it, staring at him, judging him. You're lucky, said a voice. Arry looked up. There was only one place where that voice could be coming from. He slowly looked towards the Deltic, who was staring directly at him. What? He said in a shaky voice. You have a shed, you still have work. At least you're useful for something, the Deltic said coldly. Arry was taken aback. It was the first time one of the diesels spoke up. What do you mean? He asked in a shaky voice. The Deltic smirked. You don't know, do you? My boy, we are a dying breed on the way out. They've created something newer, something faster, something better. And oldies like us are sidelined, put on the scrap heap, never to run again. Arry stared in disbelief. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. No, you're wrong. We are the something newer, faster and better. We'll replace those clapped out kettles. I was just like you when I was younger, said the Deltic. When me, my brothers and sisters, started replacing the Pacifics on the eastern region, we felt like we were invincible. We were new, the future. Long live the Deltics, we used to say. But then it happened to us. High-speed trains were brought in. Sleek, modern engines that can go up to 125 miles per hour. No need for us anymore. One by one, we were all withdrawn. Most of us had been scrapped. Arry didn't know what to say. He stared down at the rails in shock, letting the diesel's words sink in. He then frowned, a look of anger on his face. Even so, I'm an 08, he said selfishly. My class is the most successful design this country has ever seen. Some of my siblings were even shipped overseas. That doesn't mean anything anymore, said the Deltic crossly. Not when diesel rail cars start to work on the main line. They don't need to wait around for their coaches when they're permanently attached. And with the roads taking most of our freight services, they won't need you for shunting trucks either. Arry had had enough of this conversation. He was quite ready to go home. The Deltic wasn't done, however. You don't believe me, do you? Why don't you look for yourself? The Deltic gestured behind him. Arry looked, and what he saw shocked him. It was the remains of a rusted Class 08, hollowed out and lifeless. All what was valuable had been taken, and what was left was waiting to be melted down. Arry couldn't believe his eyes. He felt sick. He thought he was immortal too, that nothing could touch him, that he would be fine. He was in denial. The Deltic's voice lowered, his face void of any emotion. They finished cutting him up yesterday. I have no sympathy for him. Every diesel in this yard deserves this, including myself. It's the way things are meant to be. If I were you, I'd sharpen up and be thankful that you're still running. Arry said nothing. He simply sat there, looking away from the Deltic. It was all too much. Finally back! Arry jumped. He looked over towards the Deltic, but it had closed its eyes and gone unresponsive. "Over here, you daft tit." Arry looked down. It was his driver and some workman who had come to fix the points. "You alright?" asked Arry's driver. "You look as if you've seen a ghost." "Fine," stuttered Arry. "Just fix the points already. I'm ready to go home." Soon the points were fixed, and Arry hurried back to his shed. He could have sworn he saw the Deltic smirking as he went. When Arry got back to the shed, Bert was waiting. "About time you got here," grumbled Bert. "Shut up," snapped Arry. "It's not my fault, it's those damn points." Alright. What's gone into you then?" muttered Bert. Arry sighed. He then looked over at his twin. He then told Bert all about what the diesel had said. Bert silently listened, feeling just as uneasy as Arry had. When Arry was finished, there was a long silence. "Nah," said Bert in a shaky voice. "That couldn't happen. Not to us, anyway." Arry sighed. "Don't know, Bert. I don't know." No more was said for the rest of the night. The diesels remained silent and eventually drifted off to an uneasy sleep. For the first time in their lives, they were truly afraid.